I stood at the head of the table in the private wing of the Ritz-Carlton, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Around me sat 24 people, all dressed in silk and tuxedos, their faces flushed with the glow of expensive Cabernet and the thrill of being part of the inner circle. At the center of it all was my son, Leo. At 32, he looked every bit the successful architect he claimed to be, broad-shouldered, charismatic, and currently wearing a watch that cost more than my first house. Beside him was Chloe, his fiancée, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, especially when she looked at me. Leo tapped his glass. The room fell into a respectful silence. "I have an announcement," Leo said, his voice booming with a confidence that made my stomach churn. "As you all know, Chloe and I have dreamed of a destination wedding in Lake Como. We weren't sure we could swing the 5-star villa we wanted, until today." He turned to me, his eyes shining with a predatory kind of love. "My mother, the woman who has always been my rock, has decided to give us the ultimate early wedding present. She's liquidating her retirement property in Sedona to cover the entire $50,000 venue cost. To Mom." The room erupted. "To Martha," they cheered. Chloe blew me a kiss. Chloe's parents, who hasn't spoken 10 words to me all night, were suddenly beaming, raising their glasses in my direction. I didn't stand up. I didn't cheer. I sat there, frozen, feeling the weight of the iron boundary I had never been brave enough to build, finally starting to crush me. Leo hadn't asked. He hadn't even hinted. He had simply decided that my life's work, my peace, my security, my tiny cabin in the woods where I finally felt at home, was his for the taking. He thought he had backed me into a corner. He thought that in front of these people I would be too embarrassed, too motherly to say no. He thought he knew me. But as I looked at the checkbook in my purse, and then at the son I had spent 3 decades overprotecting, I realized something. If I didn't break this cycle now, I wouldn't just lose my house. I would lose my soul. I'm going to tell you how I got to that table. I'm going to tell you how a woman who spent 30 years as a yes man for her son finally found the strength to walk out of the Ritz-Carlton and leave him with a bill he couldn't pay. Because sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them drown in the consequences of their own ego.
To understand Leo, you have to understand me. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I grew up in a house where we counted pennies for milk. When Leo's father walked out on us when Leo was just 5, I made a silent, desperate vow. My son would never feel the cold. He would never know the word no if it was within my power to give him a yes. I worked 3 jobs. I was a paralegal by day, a transcriptionist by night, and I cleaned offices on the weekends. I was exhausted, but seeing Leo in the best clothes, at the best summer camps, and eventually at a top-tier university was my fuel. But here's the thing about boundaries. If you don't set them early, they become invisible. It started small. When he was 16, he crashed the car I'd spent 2 years saving for. I didn't make him work to pay for the repairs. I apologized to him for the car not having better safety features and took an extra shift to fix it. In college, when he blew his entire semester's living allowance on a spring break trip to Mexico, I didn't let him go hungry. I took out a small personal loan so he wouldn't lose focus on his studies. I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was being the mother I never had. But my best friend Sarah, the only person who ever told me the truth, saw it for what it was. "Martha," she said to me one afternoon while we sat on my porch, "you're not building a man. You're building a monument to your own guilt. You're terrified that if he struggles, it means you failed him, but the struggle is where the character is made." I dismissed her. I told her she didn't understand. Leo was special. He was sensitive. He had big dreams. Leo graduated and became an architect, or so I thought. He worked for a firm, but he spent more time networking at country clubs than drawing blueprints. He moved into a luxury apartment he couldn't afford. He bought a European sports car. And every time the credit card bills got too high, he'd come to me with a story. "The firm is slow on commissions, Mom. Chloe's car broke down, Mom. It's just an investment in my future, Mom." And like a well-trained machine, I'd produce the cash. I'd dipped into my 401k. I'd sold my jewelry. I told myself it was an investment in my son's success. I didn't realize I was just funding a lifestyle that was a complete lie.
Then came Chloe. Chloe was the daughter of a prominent developer, or at least that was the story Leo told. She was used to the best of everything. When they got engaged, the demands shifted from requests to expectations. They didn't want a wedding. They wanted a coronation. Martha, Chloe had said to me over a lunch I paid for 3 months ago, Leo's career is all about image. If we don't have the right wedding, people won't take him seriously. They'll think he's middle class. She said middle class like it was a contagious disease. I looked at my own hands, calloused from years of work, the nails unpolished. I looked at my reflected image in the restaurant window, wearing a dress I'd had for 6 years. I understand, I told her, but I've already given you $20,000 for the ring and the engagement party. My savings are getting low. Chloe's face didn't change, but her voice went cold. Leo said you had the property in Sedona. He said it was just sitting there, losing value. He said you'd do anything for his happiness. That property was my sanctuary. It was a tiny 1-bedroom cabin on 2 acres of red rock. It was where I went to breathe. It was the only thing I had that was truly mine. That's my retirement home, Chloe, I said, my voice trembling. Well, she sighed, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. Leo said you'd understand. He said you wouldn't want to be the reason his big break in Lake Como didn't happen. The guilt tripped my internal wiring. I spent the next month in a fog. Leo stopped calling to ask how I was. He only called to send me listings for realtors in Sedona. He sent me mood boards for the wedding, each one more expensive than the last. He was gaslighting me into believing that my survival was secondary to his vanity, and I was letting him. The night of the announcement started with a feeling of dread. Leo had invited me to this celebratory dinner to meet Chloe's parents' high society friends. I arrived early. I was wearing my best suit, but I felt like a servant in a palace. Chloe's father, a man named Richard, who smelled of expensive cigars and condescension, barely acknowledged me. Leo tells me you're a real estate investor, Richard said, swirling his whiskey. I was a paralegal, I said. Leo jumped in immediately, his face flushing. Mom is being modest. She's got a huge portfolio in Sedona. She's actually liquidating some assets right now to help us with the Como project. I looked at Leo. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was lying. He was using me as a prop to impress a man he wanted to be. Throughout the dinner, the talk was of nothing but money. Who bought what? Who went where? Chloe's mother spent 20 minutes talking about the tragedy of her florist using the wrong shade of white for her last gala. I sat there, eating salmon that tasted like cardboard, realizing that these people didn't care about me. They didn't care about Leo. They only cared about the wealth we represented. And the wealth Leo was projecting was entirely built on my blood, sweat, and tears. Then came the toast, the retirement gift announcement. When Leo said the words, liquidating her retirement property, the air left my lungs. He hadn't just asked, he had publicly signed the deed for me. He had used the social pressure of 24 wealthy strangers to try and force my hand. I saw Chloe's father nod at me, a look of approval finally on his face. Now I was worthy of his time, because I was giving my son $50,000 I didn't have. I looked at Leo. He was smiling, basking in the applause. He looked so much like his father in that moment, charming, manipulative, and utterly hollow. I felt a coldness wash over me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. For 30 years, I had been the velvet around the hammer of his life. I had cushioned every blow, softened every fall. But tonight, the velvet was gone. I stood up. The cheering died down, replaced by a polite, expectant silence. They thought I was going to give a speech. They thought I was going to cry and talk about how proud I was. Leo, I said. My voice didn't shake. It sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone stronger. Mom, Leo said, his smile faltering just a fraction. You're right, I said, looking around the room. Retirement is a time for gifts. It's a time to finally enjoy the fruits of a lifetime of hard work. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was my ledger. I had kept it for years. Every loan, every car payment, every emergency fund I had ever given him. For 30 years, Leo, I have given you everything. I have given you my savings, my sleep, and my peace of mind. I have carried your debts on my back because I was afraid that if I didn't, you wouldn't love me. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Chloe's mother narrowed her eyes. Leo's face turned a deep, angry red. "Mom, what are you doing?" he hissed. "Sit down." "I'm setting a boundary, Leo," I said. "An iron boundary." I looked at Chloe's father. "Richard, my son told you I'm paying for this wedding. He told you I'm selling my home in Sedona. He lied. I am not selling my home. I am not paying for Lake Como. In fact, I'm not paying for this dinner." I turned back to Leo. "You want to live like a king? Then you better learn how to build a kingdom, because as of tonight, the bank his mom is closed, permanently." I took a single bill out of my wallet, the cost of my own meal and a tip, and laid it on the white tablecloth. "I'm leaving now," I said. "I'm going back to my cabin in Sedona, the one you thought was just sitting there. I'm going to sit on my porch and I'm going to watch the sunset. And for the first time in 30 years, I'm not going to wonder if you're okay, because you're a 32-year-old man with an architect's degree and a luxury car. You'll figure it out." I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for the screaming to start, though I heard Leo's voice rise in a panicked "Mom," as the heavy oak doors swung shut behind me.
I stayed at Sarah's house for a week. I turned off my phone. When I finally turned it back on, it was like a war zone. 14 missed calls from Leo, 22 text messages. The first few were angry. "How could you do that to me? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Chloe's father thinks we're frauds." Then they became desperate. "Mom, please. The Ritz sent me the bill for the dinner. It's $4,000. I don't have it. Mom, the wedding planners are calling for the deposit. If I don't pay by Friday, we lose the venue." Then they became cruel. "You're a selfish, bitter woman. Don't expect to ever see your grandchildren." I sat in Sarah's kitchen, reading them. I cried, of course. My heart felt like it had been put through a shredder. But every time I felt the urge to reach for my checkbook, I remembered the look on Leo's face at that table, the look of a man who didn't see a mother, but a resource. Sarah sat across from me, sipping her tea. "It hurts, doesn't it?" "It's killing me," I whispered. "Good," she said. "That pain is the feeling of your spine growing back. Don't blink, Martha. If you cave now, you're not just losing your money, you're telling him that his cruelty works." The wedding didn't happen in Lake Como. It didn't happen at all. Chloe left him 3 weeks later. It turns out her wealthy family was just as much of a facade as Leo's. They were looking for a wealthy mother-in-law to bail them out. When the iron boundary went up, the interest in the marriage evaporated. Leo lost the car. He lost the apartment. He ended up sleeping on a friend's couch, working a junior drafting job at a firm that didn't care about his networking skills. He didn't call me for 6 months. I went back to Sedona. I spent my days gardening. I spent my evenings reading. I went to a therapist, a wonderful woman named Dr. Eris, who helped me understand that no is a complete sentence. "You weren't helping him, Martha," Dr. Eris told me. "You were stealing his agency. You were preventing him from ever becoming the man he was supposed to be because you were too afraid to let him be the man he actually was." 6 months to the day after the Ritz-Carlton disaster, my doorbell rang. It was Leo. He didn't look like an architect. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He looked tired. He looked humbled. "Mom," he said, standing on my porch. I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. "Hello, Leo." I came to apologize," he said. He didn't have his sports car. He had a bus pass sticking out of his pocket. "For what?" I asked. "For everything. For the wedding. For the lies. For thinking I could just take from you." He looked down at his shoes. "I'm working, Mom. A real job. I'm living in a studio apartment in the city. It's small, and it smells like old soup, but I'm paying for it, myself." I felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked me over. This was the man I had wanted him to be, not the one in the tuxedo, but the one who knew the value of a dollar he'd earned. "I'm glad to hear that, Leo," I said. Can I come in? I don't want money, Mom, I swear. I miss my mom." I stepped aside and opened the door. We didn't fix everything that day. We didn't fix it for a year. We had to learn a whole new language. A language where he didn't ask for favors and I didn't offer bailouts. There were times he struggled, times he couldn't afford his electric bill. Every fiber of my being wanted to write the check. But I didn't. Instead, I invited him over for dinner. I gave him a bag of groceries. I gave him my love, but I kept my iron boundary firmly in place. And a funny thing happened. He started to respect me. Not for what I could give him, but for who I was.
It's been 2 years since I walked out of that dinner. Leo is still an architect, but a real one now. He's proud of his work. He's dating a woman named Maya, a teacher who thinks he's wonderful, not because of his portfolio, but because of his character. As for me, I'm still in my cabin. My roof is fixed, my medical bills are paid, and my soul is at peace. If you're listening to this, and you're a parent who feels like an ATM, if you're a friend who is tired of being used, if you're a person who has forgotten where you end and someone else's demands begin, listen to me. Setting a boundary isn't an act of hate. It's the ultimate act of love. It's telling someone, I love you enough to let you grow. I love you enough to let you fail. And I love myself enough to stop being the cushion for your fall. The iron boundary might be the hardest thing you ever built. It might cause tears. It might cause silence. It might even cost you a relationship for a while. But on the other side of that boundary is your life. And trust me, your life is worth the price of the hammer. Thank you for listening to Iron Boundary. If this story touched you, if you've ever had to say no when it was the hardest thing in the world, share your story in the comments. We're all building our boundaries together. Until next time, stay firm, stay kind, and remember, your kindness is a gift, not a debt.